In this video, we're going to build one of these raised garden beds together, and I'm going to give you 21 tips and mistakes to avoid when building and caring for your next raised garden. The process will be easy, fun, and forgiving, but there are 2 critical mistakes that you can't make. So if you choose not to watch this video until the end, there's a free list in the video description. So let's get started. The first step of the process is to choose some good lumber. I recommend at least 1.5 inches thick, which is the thickness of a 2x4. This will allow you to stand or lean on your garden bed without breaking it. I find it easier to paint or stain the long boards before any cuts are made for a garden box. It's much easier than painting all the cracks and corners on a finished product. If you give a little bit of spacing between your boards, it allows you to flip them so you can paint all 3 sides and only have to wait for them to dry once. Of course, you'll have cut ends that need painted at the end, but it generally only takes 5 minutes to touch everything up. I leave one side of each board unpainted. This is the side that will be in contact with the soil, and we don't want any harmful chemicals leaching. I also want to mention, those of you who might not have a saw or just don't want to make a mess at your house, you can use Lowe's or Home Depot to make these cuts for you. They won't do all the cuts at once, but they'll generally do 1 or 2 free cuts every time you buy lumber. So here's the trick. I did this a few years ago. Plan your garden box out a couple months ahead of time, and every time you're in the vicinity of one of these stores, you can go and cherry pick the 2 best boards you can find straight with no knots, have your cuts made, and repeat this process till you have all your cuts. Now, before you buy lumber or make any cuts, plan the dimensions of your garden bed wisely so you have little to no waste. Find out what lengths are commonly sold in your area and plan accordingly. In my area, the common lengths are 8, 10, 12, 16, and 20 feet long. So in this project, I'm doing a 13 feet by 3 foot bed using 16-foot boards. I only have to do 1 cut and there's no waste. If you don't want a bed this large, you can easily do an 8 by 4 foot bed utilizing 12-foot boards. I don't recommend building the width of your garden bed over 4 feet long. At 4 feet, we can comfortably reach in 2 feet on either side. Much longer than this, and the average person will have trouble reaching the middle. As for the height of your garden box, a good rule of thumb is between knee and waist high. Keep in mind, if you build a taller box, it's going to require more materials and soil, which could increase your cost, and taller crops like tomatoes and corn might be out of reach when they mature. A shorter box might get more weed seed blown into it over the year, and it's going to require you to bend down a lot more. Now that our cuts are done, I'm going to frame in the top portion of our garden bed. Attaching a 2x6 to the 4x4 post, I'm going to use a scrap 2x4 as a placeholder since I want the joint of this bed to be on the shorter side. Keep this in mind when considering the placement of your bed. I like to hide the joints wherever I can, keeping the more aesthetically pleasing side where I like it. For each attachment, I'm doing 2 pilot holes followed by 3-inch screws. The pilot holes make it so that I don't split the wood and help me keep my angles square as I hold the wood in place. You could use decking screws without pilot holes and have little risk of wood splitting, but I still find some benefit to using pilot holes. If you're new to woodworking, keep in mind that a 2x4 is actually 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. Respectively, a 2x6 is 5.5 inches by 1.5 inches. I'm not really sure why it's like that in America, but if you happen to know, leave me and everybody else a comment. I told you earlier that I was building a 13 by 3 bed, and I did, but I lost the footage for that one. But luckily I also filmed the build of my 8 foot by 4 foot bed and my 12 foot by 4 foot bed. So you'll be seeing a little bit of replacement video. If you're making a raised bed where the exact dimensions are very important, you should note that this 8 foot by 4 foot bed that I have here is not actually 8 feet by 4 feet because you have to account for the thickness of each board. So the way that I built it, it's actually 8 feet by 4 feet 3 inches. In order to make it 8 by 4, you'd have to cut 2 8-foot boards and 2 4-foot 9-inch boards, or do miter joints like a picture frame. The reason I framed in only the tops of these garden beds is because they're much easier to carry this way. If I was building at the actual garden site, I'd probably just build all the sides fully and then put them together. If you happen to build your garden box the same way, carry it to where you want to place it, but put it right next to where you plan on placing it upside down. Then finish assembling it so you can tip it right back into its proper spot. If you've made it this far into the video, rest assured there's only a few more things we need to talk about with the build of this box. However, there are two things that are much more important: where we put it and what we put in it. Unless you plan on growing a bunch of shade-loving plants, we need to put your raised bed in a place where it gets at least 8 hours of full sun every day. If you plan on putting yours out in an open field or yard, this won't be a problem. But for those of us who have fences, buildings, and shade trees around us, it can be a little bit tricky. Last year, we moved into a new rental house, and I decided to put a garden box on the side fence in my backyard. Early in the spring, it was getting blasted with sun, so I decided to plant some of my favorite sun-loving peppers in that spot. Everything was going great until about August. Then I noticed the garden started getting a little bit half-shaded. And weeks before harvest time, they were getting full shade every day. Needless to say, my yields were greatly diminished that year. So what's the solution? Do we have to sit around and take meticulous notes throughout the season to plan where we want to put our garden the following year? Well, that's one way you could do it, but the easier way would be to go to suncalc.org. I discovered this website a while ago, and there's a free tool that will tell you where the sun rises and falls at your address any day of the year. The second concern with garden bed placement is considering if there are varmints in your area: rabbits, deer, gophers, anything that may want to eat your vegetables. Some galvanized hardware mesh stapled across the bottom of your bed can do a lot to keep things out. And while we're going through all this effort to keep things out of the garden, let's do a little something to keep us in the garden. The best place to place a garden is a place we enjoy. A garden should be a place to relax and a gentle reminder of work-life balance. So try to make the daily chores as easy as possible, making irrigation readily available and leaving enough space around your beds for easy wheelbarrow access. Now that we have our raised beds fully built out, it's worth the extra effort to put a middle brace in every 6 to 8 feet. This will snug everything up and keep the boards from bowing when we fill it with soil. And I'm not speaking from experience or anything, but this is a requirement, not a recommendation, if you don't want your boards to bow out. Now that we have our garden beds completely built out, it's time to place them exactly where we want them. I like to mark mine with a can of spray paint and then move the box completely out of the way while I dig my holes. You don't necessarily have to have legs on your garden box like I do on mine, especially if you're putting it on completely level ground, but the legs do serve a couple purposes. On unlevel ground, they can make the leveling process much easier, and a garden bed with posts in the ground is generally a lot more sturdy, so it's not going to move while you're filling it or if it gets knocked with something heavy. Now that the beds are set, remeasure and level them out. Add or subtract dirt from the 4 corner posts to get your bed level. If you're leveling multiple beds, get one bed level and then work off of that one so all your beds are the same height. Filling these beds with soil is by far the most labor-intensive task out of this entire project, so make sure your beds are measured out, solid, and level before you start to fill. To make filling these easier, I'm going to take off the front board on these taller raised beds. Douglas fir, the wood that I'm using on these garden beds, gets a lot of criticism for being prone to rot and being a poor material for building a garden bed. But the cost of rot-resistant woods like redwood and cedar is usually substantially more. And the materials and stain that I'm using in this project is tried and tested in my area. 5 years ago, I built with these materials in my parents' backyard, and they've withstood triple-digit summers and cold Idaho winters. And I wouldn't be surprised if they last another 5 years. They're in pretty good shape. Now let's discuss the most important part when building a raised bed, and that is filling them with good quality soil. I've seen a few people build beautiful beds and then fill those beds with garbage soil. It just makes zero sense. The whole point of building a raised garden bed is so that we can have fresh organic vegetables at home. And if you put subpar soil in these beds, you're going to get subpar vegetables, if you get any at all. So if you don't have access to high quality soil, find yourself a reputable garden center and buy some. That's what I had to do on this project. I believe the total material costs for the 3 beds that I built was around $300. and the soil you see being dumped out in my driveway was $400. I'm sure I could have done it cheaper with a little extra effort building my own, but time was of the essence on this spring project. Hopefully you have a more affordable option, but if you don't, skimp on everything else before you settle for low quality soil. Soil is literally the lifeblood of your garden. If you don't know how to identify high quality soil, do your research before you make any purchases or go through the labor of filling up a garden bed. I'll try to make another video on building soil in the future, so subscribe if you don't want to miss anything. In the meantime, I wish you the best in the garden.